Welcome back to Media 7. Marcus Lush, Jeremy Wells, Graham Hill, Jackie Brown, Wallace Chapman, Damien Christie, Andrew Dickens, Andrew Topping, Jude Anaru, Mikey Havoc, Nick Dwyer, Hugh Sunday, Noel McCarthy, Olivia Kemba, Rebecca Wright, Chris Forster, Nigel Snowden, Jonathan Marshall, Aroha Harawira and Brent Impey. What do these broadcast industry figures have in common? Well, here's a clue.
At this radio station, we do our utmost to abide by the Broadcasting Standards Authority and their rules and guidelines. If you seriously think we've crossed the line on air, give us a call on 309 4831 and tell us about it. We'll be able to help you out and tell you the procedure if you wish to make a formal complaint to the Broadcasting Standards Authority. Fuck knuckles, cock and piss. Balls. Thank you.
Yes, all the above emerged from the Auckland student radio station 95BFM and its AM precursor Radio B, and that's only half the list. The B is celebrating its 40th anniversary this year, and I'm joined by three of the people who have made it what it is. Former BFM News Chief and New Artland producer, Gemma Gracewood.
Hi, Russell.
Former BFM Program Director and the wicked mind behind Eating Media Lunch, Birdland and others, Paul Casserly. And mentor to many and one of the station's long-time musical guardians, Troy Ferguson. Welcome to you all. Now, I think I should start by asking you how it all began, how you got involved with BFM and when. Gemma, when did you arrive there?
Oh, I was a nerd next door at Crackham, the Auckland University Student Association newspaper, and walking down the hall was this constant stream of, black-haired, tattooed, interesting people. And I thought I could never be one of them, but I could read the news. So I wandered next door one day and said, can I have a go? That's pretty much how it happened, yeah.
And I believe you were hit immediately, actually.
Well, yeah, it was Friday afternoon. They had no one to read the drive news, so I grabbed the piece of paper and I wandered in and they showed me what to do. And I read my bulletin, and Graham Hill immediately came crashing through the two doors.
Who was Program Director at the time?
He was Program Director and Breakfast Host at the time, and he said, who was that? Who was just reading the news? Who was that? And I kind of, me? He went, you, breakfast next week. So it was one of those star-making stories that has never happened to me since.
How inspirational. Paul, when did you arrive there?
80s, mid-80s, late 80s. And some friends of mine had been up there, and I'd heard about this place called BFM. And so I was studying at Auckland Uni at the time, and it wasn't going that well. And so I heard about this place called BFM, and people were having fun there, so I went up there, and it was fun. Yeah, it was good. And in those days, you didn't have communication schools. If you wanted to do anything in broadcasting, you kind of had to do a degree or go to journalism school, and they were the kind of the two options. So yeah, I just turned up and started, found my way, hung around like a snotty little idiot for a while, and was picked on by the smarter older guys, and kind of enjoyed that, I suppose, in a weird kind of way.
And it's interesting, as you say, that there weren't communications courses back then, but I think to this day, I mean, I should probably point out that I was on the board, so I saw some of this happen. The people who succeeded weren't necessarily the ones who'd come off courses, they were the people who had the BFM factor. Well,
I think BFM's always been kind of a collection of misfits and people who, back in the old days, probably would have been in some sort of institution, maybe like Oakley or whatever, but now they let these people out on the streets. And BFM kind of collected a lot of those people who were kind of a bit, maybe on the edge, and it had something like that about it as well, I think.
So Troy, were you on the edge when you arrived? When was that?
I assume I would have been. 1985 it would have been. I didn't go to university, I didn't even really go to school or anything. I decided that my education was going to come from punk rock and post-punk and everything that came after it. So around that time, you could go and see bands. You'd be sneaking in, of course. You'd go and see bands, but everything shut at 11. There was no buses till 7 or 8 the next morning, so we had to have something to do, and I figured, maybe if we do a radio show all night, we'll go straight from, go from a gig, go to the radio show, and then catch a bus in the morning. So that was kind of it. Really, that was just an excuse to participate in something. Punk rock said you could do everything you wanted to do. Well, a lot of us actually can't do anything very well. So it's just a case of, I participate in something I can do, which is play records to other people.
And that was actually particularly important when you arrived there, because it was the kind of records that weren't being played on any other radio station. Maybe there's a broader range of fare on commercial radio now, but back then, BFM was it, wasn't it?
Well, to be honest, I think that the records weren't even being played in other people's houses or their bedrooms or anything. It was, you'd be paying $40 for an imported album back then. Sort of the only place you could hear these good things was on BFM. And it started out kind of like a private club thing. Have you heard this BFM? That kind of thing. But, as more people got into the music, it was a case of, where can I hear this? And it was the only outlet for it.
Does that still apply now that the focus of music discovery has shifted so much to the internet? Is radio still important?
The internet?
Yeah.
Is that thing still around?
You know where all the DJs get their tracks these days.
Absolutely, yeah.
It's different. It's different.
It is different. I think the more places you can find music, the better. That's what makes things fun, really, doesn't it? I mean, it's going to be, does it mean people will stop listening to radio? Perhaps some people will. But what radio brings is context, and I don't think you can get that from a blog aggregator or even...
I think it also brings community. I think that's a big part of it as well, is the fact that you're listening to this selection of music with all these other people who are listening at the same time. So there's a feeling of belonging for all the misfits who are out there.
Yeah.
And kind of even more so now with the internet, that old thing, and the fact that you can pretty much sit there and make up your own radio station and listen to it yourself. Well, if you're the only one listening, then what's the point, in a way? So if you're the one listening to BFM and you recognise that song as one you found for yourself on...
Well, there was a theory that the iPod shuffle, the shuffle feature on iPod would kill radio, but it hasn't done it.
Hold on, haven't iPods put an FM radio receiver on their new models now?
Yeah, it doesn't work very well.
Yeah.
Oh, doesn't it?
Terrible.
Oh, I don't know. But, yeah.
You've gone on to prodigious
A few other
media
things.
career. How much do you think it was because you were actually able to do things at BFM that you wouldn't have been able to do if...
I think it was mostly because of those things, absolutely. I did do the communications degree at AUT, and so I was one of the nerdier nerds who came across to the news. But I think one of the reasons I did that is because as much as we were being taught the rules at journalism school, it was also expected that we'd go on to the traditional sweeping the editor's floor and, sub-editing other people's mainstream news stories that didn't really hold any interest for me. And I wanted to tell stories about my own community, which is what I've continued to go on and do. But I also think that the healthy bullying and the twisted, warped sense of humour certainly helped as well. It kind of pushes you up a gear in a way that doing a traditional media job doesn't do, I guess.
I was always astonished at how many people would come off the front reception desk and go immediately to air or into the creative department or something. I couldn't work out how that happened. The receptionist suddenly becomes the breakfast host.
Yeah, well, this is an interesting thing about when I started. And you must remember to put Garth Bray in your list of people. Garth Bray, One News,
yes.
Because he was doing the news at the time I arrived, and there were only about 5 of us. And this is just after Marcus Lush left, really, and he'd only just started Newsnight. So in terms of the BFM celebrity factor, that didn't exist when I turned up and when you guys turned up. And it's only more recently, as I guess mainstream media has started looking for quirky and different people, that it's become a thing. So I think that maybe that's a challenge that BFM has these days more often, is to figure out who's there for the star factor. I can remember when Marcus
Lush was considered a little too risque for television.
Yeah.
Which seems crazy now.
And now he's breakfast on Radio Live. How does that happen? So I wonder if there are people now turning up because they think that's the place that's going to make them the Jackie Brown or the Hugh Sunday, whereas that's not the reason that any of us turned up at all.
What's your BFM story, Russell? How did you end up there?
My BFM story was I did the odd show in the mid-80s because all my friends were doing it, and I knew people in bands, and then I came back from London and started doing a thing called Hard News because I thought that what I heard on the news one day was absurdly poor. So Graham Hill said, "When can you start?"
Right. Well, Graham was one of the great, he was one of the great program directors of BFM and one of the great breakfast hosts as well.
You were also involved to some degree with the advertising creative, weren't you? Because it's one of the things that
back in the old days, Russell. Back in the old days, you were involved in everything because it was a pretty small kind of bunch of people. But we were we love making ads and spending a lot of time in the studio, and that because there was an 8-track machine, which was a rare thing in those days, with reels on it, and you could record 8 channels of something at the same time, something that even the smallest child now has on a laptop. But in those days it was kind of, you'd have to spend a lot of money to go to a studio to get time with something like that. So BFM had this, and it was hardly ever used. So that was a great part of the attraction for me to go there, and making ads and that sort of thing was that was fun.
How much of the key to the sound of the station do you think that the sound of the ads has been?
Oh, it's everything, because that's the one thing that separates, apart from the music, and the fact that you've got all these people who are like Epicureans of their particular flavour of music, whether it's a dub head with reggae, or it's a Stinky Jim with what he does, or there's so many people who they're kind of like, it's like a bunch of amazing record stores where you go in and these people are playing these tracks that that they've collected. But apart from that, I think the ads are the thing, because they're not sucking up to the advertiser, and they're not pushing the hard sell, and they kind of have their own, they're kind of the anti-advertising. I mean, if I was an advertiser, I'd be, you'd get an ad back and you might not be happy with it. The person who pays for it probably isn't happy with the ad always on BFM. But the audience always is.
Well, I can remember Bill Curtin, the former station manager, talking to Kim Hill once, and she mentioned the advertising. He said, well, our listeners actually rather like the ads. They write to us about them in appreciation. And Kim Hill could not conceive, I cannot conceive of that.
They used to ring up and ask to hear, can you play that ad again? Yeah. There's no other radio station that happens on.
Yeah. Troy, you've seen the bright young talent come through over the years. When I had the governance role, that was always my fear, was that would stop happening.
No,
that it
not
would
a
stop
chance.
being the talent factory, that would stop. So were you ever worried that would happen?
No, because every year there seems to be a bunch of other 17 and 18-year-olds existing. So a lot of those are going to come along to us, and they do. And it's, I don't think Gemma was correct at all in saying, they want to come along to be superstars. No, they don't.
I worry that they want to.
Well, don't worry about that.
Oh, good.
No, it's that people want to come along and just be part of something and contribute something and do something. And if anything, I think more younger people have come along in the last 5 or 6 years. There was a time when there was just sort of old people hanging around.
You're still there, though.
Someone's got to teach them. But it's a really free and open environment. People can come along and sort of do things that they want to do. About the adverts, the advertisements to me sum up more the attitude of the station, and not just of the station, but of everybody who's part of the station. And I think I was talking to my friend Paul earlier tonight. No, I wasn't, because we're not really friends. That's true. We were talking earlier, and I was saying that no one actually ever leaves BFM. Gemma and Paul have both gone.
I was actually going to ask you
there.
about that.
They still work for BFM, they're just not on BFM's airwaves. I think what Paul has done in television in this decade is the kind of thing that Paul was doing on the radio in the 1990s. No one else in New Zealand did that. It was a crazy thing. It was like, that's too out there. You can't do that. Paul is one of the people who has revolutionised television in this country. Revolutionised the attitude of things. Bill Curtin's another one. Gemma, I'm coming to you. Please don't be so impatient. The thing is, these people
$50 bucks for you later.
Oh, that's all right. These people have gone on to careers. Gemma, again, working in television and radio, that has taken so much of the BFM attitude, and I believe has contributed to a real change in the culture of this country, the popular culture of this country. At one stage, the kind of things that you see on TV and hear on mainstream radio and whatever now, they would only ever have happened where we were at the Auckland University with how many people listening we don't even know.
In that sense, it's a cultural identifier, isn't it? I still feel like a BFM person.
Yeah.
Again, I was going to come to you, but you hadn't arranged payment, so... you've taken BFM onto the internet. You've taken BFM onto a television show like this, and that's what I think people forget. People think, it's a radio station, it must be about music. It must be about learning to be a talent. It's not really about that. It's being somebody who was part of something else. And that's what it is. That's why we still have the 16, 17, 18-year-olds coming along.
And on that note, we're actually going to finish, but that was quite the speech. Thank you, Troy.
Oh, I talk too much, I'm sorry.
Well, that is all for now, but we'll see you all again in 10 years' time. Thank you, Gemma Gracewood, Paul Casserly and Troy Ferguson. And Jose Barbosa now looks at a media company whose paths have often crossed with BFM's. No, it's not on air, it's on the streets.
In today's modern city, there's a veritable jambalaya of visual input.
There's no entry signs, kebab signs, corporate overlords, disapproving dogs, sea captain hats, discarded performance supplement packages, alcohol, no alcohol, pigeons and fat blokes. Part of that mix is the venerable street poster. Usually advertising overpriced gigs, the poster is a reassuring presence, invoking a time when advertising really was as simple as whacking some cool art on a wall.
And these are the guys who put them up.
That's Bill Fitzgerald. He's been in the sticky-on-wally game for 20 years, and on any given day, he and his guys can be seen dressing up the city's empty wall space. Bill keeps a meticulous record of what goes up.
Groove Armada, Wrangler, Dave, G&D, Rip It Up.
It hasn't always been such a tight business, though.
It was a little bit more loose, yeah, for sure. Yeah.
How so?
Some deals weren't in dollars, they were in, services or goods.
The name of the game is placement.
I see a space that is a good high traffic volume and approach the owners and put a proposal to them to lease the space for poster placement.
If you can offer a portfolio of high-profile sites, clients will come knocking. Then the posters have to go up.
And this is the fuel of their industry. Paste.
It's not as easy as it looks.
So you can apply quite liberally. Would that be right, Bill?
Sort of evenly.
Evenly? Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Oh, whoops. Oh, look, oh, yeah, okay.
The novice bill poster can quickly become a liability. It's a hard 7 days a week kind of business, but there are some benefits. It's a hoarder's dream job. Bill's office is in Aladdin's cave of treasures.
They oversold the show and they'd charge kids and, $60 or whatever it was to go the same as adults, and there was no chairs, they had to sit on the floor. Bit of a laugh.
I see that the True Bliss poster has got Pride in Place. First thing you see when you walk in. Are you a bit of a fan, Bill?
Oh, no, just saw it sitting behind something, just pulled it out for a change.
Posters are there to catch the attention of the passerby.
What makes a good poster, do you reckon?
Pretty much the same as all outdoor advertising, less is more. Don't overcrowd it. Where, who and why.
Street posters are like little windows into another world. They engage us and sometimes encourage us to look at something in a completely different way.
Former BFM News Director Jose Barbosa with that report. Coming up, reflections on consumer advocacy with Sue Chetwin.